welcome to another episode of Inside CKP. I am your host, Jeremy Como, and with us we have Mr. Scott Huggins for the first time. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate you having me.
Uh, uh, but before we get started, let's go ahead and pay the bills. This fine show is brought to you by the great people at Chris Kennedy Publishing. You can go on to chriskennedypublishing.com to find all your reading needs. They have sci-fi, they have fantasy, military sci-fi, space operas, a little bit of romance, very little. Anything you want to read, they have it. They have audiobooks. They're even going international. So go check them out. Sign up for the newsletter and get all the latest news. Of course, you can support this show and Chris Kennedy Publishing by going to Chris Kennedy Patreon. And of course, by buying the books on either the chriskennedypublishing.com or Amazon. And with that being said, Scott, tell us where we can find you online.
Okay, well, you can find me online at gscotthuggins.com, and that's a blog called The Logocentric Orbit. And yeah, so that's where I kind of put my my announcements. You can even sign up for my newsletter there, amazingly enough. And but it's also where I've got my blogs and thoughts and just ideas about writing and life in general.
Awesome. And I harp on this every episode. Fans that are watching now and in the future, please sign up for those new newsletters. You get free stuff. And you're if you're waiting to find stuff on social media with the algorithms that they have, good luck. If you want news, get it straight from the source of the authors that you love. So where else can they, if they wanted to communicate with you, where can they find you?
Well, I've also got a Twitter account. I've also, which is interesting these days. You can also find me on Facebook. I've got an author page, also G. Scott Huggins, and yeah, that's I generally respond to friend requests, and so yeah, you can get in touch with me in any of those ways.
Okay. And of course, you can buy his books on Amazon. And are you doing anything with your Patreon?
Well, the Patreon has been a little slow lately, so that's not something I'm really keeping up very much right now. But thank you.
Okay. All right. So the reason we're all here is because this young man has a lovely book coming out tomorrow.
Yes, it is launching tomorrow.
So, and that is Responsibility of the Throne. And if you wouldn't mind, Scott, give us your elevator pitch on this book and maybe the series.
Okay, well, the elevator pitch for the series would be that the main character, whose nickname is Responsibility for a number of reasons, she is the lost half dragon princess. And the first book is kind of how she becomes the unlost half dragon princess and returns to her home just in time to save it from an evil plot by a dastardly and powerful foe. And this book is actually more about dealing with a plot that she finds going on within the twin kingdoms of her home. So and how she is going to have to discover and stop it.
Oh, awesome. That sounds like a great story. So would you describe it as primarily fantasy, or is there some sci-fi aspects to it, or?
Yeah, it's really kind of science fantasy. It's the strange part is this isn't really something that I had expected to find myself writing. But this takes place in a world where there is both technology and magic. And one of the things that I've gotten more comments on than I thought I would is
Mhm.
if you look at the cover of Responsibility of the Throne, you see in the background. I had a couple of people say, is that are those sails on a big gun, World War I style battleship?
Yeah.
And actually, it's more like a destroyer. But yes, that ship is very much in this ship is very much in the book. And the reason for that is that one of the antagonists that Responsibility has to deal with is an empire that is emerging into a level of technologies that I might describe as between the world wars.
Mm.
And so, but also this level, and somebody's going to say, like, what are you talking about? People didn't put sails on big gun ships between the world wars, which is, of course, absolutely correct. But this world also has oceans quite a bit bigger than those on Earth. So, they actually do have a reason to put those sails on, not because they don't have any better technology, they do, but because sailing on an ocean this big, you may in fact run out of fuel and not be able to refuel. So the sails are there for a reason.
Okay, so the continents on this planet are pretty small.
Yes, in this part of the world, the continents are very small, and in fact, probably would be. I mean, something like the size of Greenland would be huge,
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
so most continents are going to be the size of, say, England and Scotland or smaller.
Awesome. Awesome. So so you said you didn't see yourself writing some of the aspects of these books. What where did these ideas come from? How did you come about to write these books?
The funny part is, I don't even really remember where the original idea came to me,
Mm.
except that I do remember that in the original story, the original the first story of Responsibility is quite old. It was actually written in 2004, back when essentially I was in the realm of any sale is a good sale. Just anybody buy my stuff for anything. I'll this was when Scott was a brand new writer, and Responsibility, the first story, which was called Abandoned Responsibility, was written in I want to say 2004,
Oh wow.
and to this anthology. Is called Fantastical Visions 4, edited by a guy named William Horner, and it was just, he put out an anthology every so often, and I was really jazzed, when I found out. I was like, yeah, I sold the story. I got $100. Woo! So it was that, and I had this story of this princess who was somehow a half dragon,
Mhm.
and she was on a huge sailing ship, and uh, the one of the features of this was that there was a large technological power out there that was very menacing, and that was all, really. And the cool part was, so then I got into my day job, which is, I'm a high school teacher, and yeah, I had a little brag shelf in my room,
Mhm.
and one of my students actually picked up that anthology and said, I really love this. I want you I would you Are you ever going to write any more? And I sort of said, well, I mean, if somebody was interested, then maybe I would.
Mhm.
And so I decided to figure out what happened to Responsibility after she actually got home, and that's where the first novel came from. So yeah, it was, and that didn't happen till at least it was at least 10 years later that I started working on that. And of course, only sold it last year.
Okay. So now everybody, well, not, I don't think everybody thinks this, but you don't just show up one day and poof, you're a published author. So,
No.
so there's a long road to hoe up until that point. So when did you know that you were interested in writing, that you wanted to become a writer, and how did all that start?
Oh, I knew that back in probably high school that, once I figured out that's like, holy crud, some people actually get paid to do this sort of thing. I wanted to do it. And yeah, it's been a very slow uphill climb, certainly for me. And I think the way it is for most people. But let's see, I was, first step really toward anything serious was I got into the Clarion science fiction writing workshop, met some wonderful authors as instructors there. I was honored to be taught by Octavia Butler and Joan Vinci and Tim Powers, who is still an awesome Baen author. And so Tim and Octavia certainly taught me a whole lot. And that was that. So that was wonderful. Then I got a couple of years later, I was awarded second place in the Writers of the Future contest, and that was my first like real published story when I got into Writers of the Future Volume 15. And so, and then after that, a few sales here and there. But nothing really huge. Honestly, there's a dry spell about the time that my kids showed up because kids, yeah, I'm sure this will come as a great shock to everyone, but children take up a lot of time, especially when they are just starting out. So yeah. So I didn't really start writing seriously again until about 2014, and then just started disciplining myself to throw out things to a whole bunch of anthologies and magazines, and had some success and kept going.
Awesome. So how did you become a part of the CKP family?
Yeah, that's an interesting story, and I'm going to tell this story on myself because Chris loves to tell this story. He every time I show up. So it was about 2017, 2018, and I've been hearing about this. Like, oh yeah, there's this new company, and they're doing like the Four Horsemen, and honestly, this is the funny part. At that point, I'm sitting here going, oh crud, I don't know if this is my thing, because I don't write very much stuff that has to do with mechs. I mean, a lot of my friends are like, oh, mechs are really cool, and I'm really glad, but that's not been something that I've been into. But I talked to him, and I think because he mentioned even at that early date that he was interested in doing some fantasy. And so I sent him the first draft of Responsibility of the Crown, and he rejected it. Yeah, and then I went and I completely forgot that I had ever talked to him about it. And then we get up to the tail end of 2019, and Rob Howell, who I'd become friends with during the vagaries of online everything, says he starts talking about, hey, we're going to start up this new imprint for CKP, and it's going to be called New Mythology Press, and I'm really looking for a whole bunch of, I'm looking for all these fantasy things. And I was like, well, I got Responsibility of the Crown, having completely forgotten that it had already been rejected. which is good, because if I had remembered that, I would never have sent it to him. I would have sent him something else, or I would have just said, I don't have anything yet. And so I send him Responsibility of the Crown. And then about 2-3 weeks later, I get a message from him saying, hey, I want to talk about this thing you sent me. And of course, when the editor like personally messages you and says, I want to talk about this, that is always a good sign. And then it wasn't until the release of Responsibility of the Crown at Fantasy in May of 2021, when I had the date wrong. Yeah, this all happens in 2021 because that's when the lockdown started to get lifted and people could actually do things again. And Chris is like, you remember you sent that to me? I said, no, I completely forgot about it. It's like, I rejected it. And but then Rob, Rob helped you with the editing and stuff, and I think it's a great book. So it was not really what I thought was going to happen, but he loves telling that story, so I figure I'm going to feed him to it and tell it on myself this time.
Yeah. Well, boys and girls, that shows you perseverance pays off. and forgetting that you already did something sometimes pays off too.
Yeah, it's not something I would really recommend as a strategy, but sometimes.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, we got a newcomer. Fred's in the house.
It's now number 7 in new releases in action and adventure literary fiction. That's awesome. Okay, well that's good news. I wasn't sure it was up there yet. So that's awesome. That's wonderful.
Awesome. So again, for people who are just coming in, we are doing a book launch for this beautiful book. I love the artwork on this.
I love the artwork on it too. I've been extraordinarily fortunate to get 2 wonderful covers for this series, and I'm really impressed.
And speaking of, here's the first one. Yeah, it's just a cool cover. And I don't think I noticed this before. The plane shooting at a dragon in the background.
Yes, and that is also a real scene from the first book too.
Very awesome. The thing I love about science fiction and fantasy and urban fantasy, especially, is the what if factor. What if magic's real in a contemporary setting or a near contemporary setting, or what it like your book, the mixing of technologies, which for me is great, because I always think about it as like, well, what if our technology didn't go in the direction that it went with combustibles and oil and things like that? What if it was something a little bit more natural, or because we have magic we don't need all this technology, or it's limited or stuff like that? That stuff just fascinates me. So that's what I really love. And then just looking at your book cover, because I like the Temeraire books.
Oh, I have not read those yet, but I'm interested in reading them.
Well, read the first couple. After that, it gets a little dry, but first couple are pretty good. The what if, because dragons exist and it's in kind of Victorian times and everything. So I love that kind of stuff. So kudos to you all who can tell those stories. I love it. Now you don't just write for CKP. You also write for other publishers.
Yes, I've definitely written for other publishers. I have been honored, especially to be involved in a lot of Baen Books'. It would be wrong to say I've been involved in a lot of their projects, but I did enter both their Baen Fantasy Adventure Award and this is actually where I ended up meeting Larry Correa, because I entered the first one of those back in 2014, and it turns out I won second place with a rather bizarre little comedy about a sorceress who gets herself embroiled in a magical cooking duel to the death.
Mhm.
So it's like the Great British Baking Show, only they kill you if you don't actually, win.
Yeah.
So there was that. So that was fun. I won second place, and Larry said he thought it was really funny, and so it took me 6 more years, but I eventually ended up winning the Adventure Fantasy Award. And then the next year, I entered the Jim Bain Memorial Award because I wasn't qualified to enter the Fantasy Award anymore. And
Mhm.
I ended up winning that award too, which was really cool. And so those are my favorite science fiction awards to talk about at the moment, or my favorite writing awards to talk about at the moment. And let's see, Larry invited me to contribute to his anthology, No Game for Knights, which
Mhm.
was a noir, uh, sort of a fantasy noir piece. So I contributed a story about that from my dark comedy series about a fantasy veterinarian who is basically enslaved in the service of the Dark Lord. So think something like Sauron.
Mhm.
Sauron won. The ring didn't get destroyed. Everyone's a slave. Everyone's life sucks. And this guy's the veterinarian that has to keep all the horrible creatures alive. So his life sucks even more. Um, yeah.
Uh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and so that appeared in the No Game for Knights, and then this afternoon, and this is fun. I just got my advance copy of this. This is Chicks
Oh
in
yeah.
Tank Tops, and this was to go riff off of what you were saying about what if.
Mhm.
So my story in here is an alternate history story, and it's what if Leonardo da Vinci had actually perfected his tank, and his assistant was a woman, and
Mhm.
she ended up being history's first tank commander. And so this is the story of how she gets to be history's first tank commander. Uh, let's see, trying to save the Free Republic of Florence uh, from being conquered by the evil popes, and so this is uh, that's how this story goes, and it's a lot of fun for me because my day job, I am a history teacher,
Mhm.
and so getting to do alternate history stuff is just a whole lot of fun.
I love alternate history stuff. Now, speaking of, so Marisa says about your awards, not a lot of wait, what did she say? I feel like not a lot of folks have won both of those awards. Is that accurate? Are you the
I,
only
I am
one?
the I am the only one who's won both of them. That's true.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's awesome. And speaking of Marisa, she is in that anthology that you
Oh
just held
yes,
up.
Marisa. Yeah, Marisa is in this anthology, and let's see. Her story is. Let's see, where is it? Next question. There it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I should
Next
have known that
question.
off the top of my head, but thanks for bailing me out. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Well, I've got the table of contents in front of me. I've got the cheat sheet.
Yeah. So speaking of history, so you teach history. Are
Yeah.
you like a big history buff, or do you have a focus or anything like that?
I generally tend to think of myself as a pretty big history buff. I mean, one of my I was pleasantly surprised at World Fantasy Con a few years back when I found myself in a room with both David Drake and SM Sterling, and SM Sterling is like one of the two, I think, greatest living alternate history authors living.
Hmm.
And we got talking about history, and I'm talking about history with these two guys. and I'm avoiding sounding like a moron, which is that was just that was is a good level to be at when you're
Mhm.
talking with S.M. Sterling and David Drake. So that was yeah. I mean, I'm really interested in like the Roman Republic,
Mhm.
you know, uh, Machiavelli's time is one where when this is set is one of my favorites in the Middle Ages. So that's where I like to play around with alternate history. And in fact, I've got another sort of magical alternate history story in a book in the anthology Talons and Talismans, which is
Mhm.
also from CKP, and that's sort of a bizarre Joan of Arc as a medieval half Gorgon assassin. So
Oh wow.
that's a fun one.
What other you've done another anthology with CKP. What?
Yes, that one was called "And Then It Got Weird,"
Oh.
and the now that's where I went. That's the only story I can think of that I've written that I would just unabashedly call steampunk. So we've got a sort of very and yeah, I suppose that would be an alternate history too, where Germany and England kind of team up to create a sort of codominium over Europe. And my character is a well, she's a spy in sort of a proto MI6 type of organization that works with dealing with strange technologies that have come up. So that's sort of my interpretation. I guess I'd call it an homage to something like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the comic book, not the movie, which was about which the less said, the better.
Yeah, no, I love that kind of stuff. So I've heard a couple different genres from you. What is your favorite genre to write in? You talk about fantasy, you talk about alternate history, and science fiction. What's your favorite? If you have a favorite, what's your favorite?
That's the funny part is that as it's turned out, I really have the more I write, the less I have a favorite genre. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, I was like science fiction all the way.
Mhm.
Fantasy is fantasy's kind of lame, and I'm not really that interested in it. So when I wrote the stories that got me into Clarion, they're both science fiction stories.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure I don't think I wrote a single fantasy story while I was at Clarion, because science fiction all the way.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in there, but the first novel length manuscript I ever put together, now that was fantasy.
Hmm.
And it surprised even me
Okay.
when I came out with it. Of course, it was the first novel length manuscript I ever wrote, and it's terrible. It's someday I hope it never sees the light of day. But but there but yeah, there we are. So
I know you know Casey Ezel.
oh,
She would call you genre fluid.
oh yeah, yeah, genre fluid, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm grateful to Casey because she gave me a wonderful a wonderful blurb on this book, so that's really awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's where we were with that.
So how growing up and never really being interested in, so like you didn't play D&D or any of that stuff. If you
No, unfortunately, my parents were overtaken by the satanic panic in the 1980s, and so it was one of those things that was kind of like, yeah, that was banned in our household till I went to college, and then I didn't care anymore. So,
Yeah.
no, I really do love D&D, and I mean, it was fantasy. What can I say? It was. I mean, my parents weren't necessarily against fantasy in all its
Hmm.
forms or anything, but it was just not something that was read as much, and it took me a while to kind of get into it. And then once I did, I found that I really very much enjoyed it.
Okay. So, I tend to ask this of all the authors. You write what you know about, or or maybe kind of put yourself into a book, is there any aspects of you or your personality or your life that have that's in these two books?
Oh, let's see. Anything that's in these two books. I think you can find some sort of general observations on history. What yeah, the one of the things that it's very difficult to get across to my students is that that when you're learning history, people, and especially as you go far back, to Middle Ages and beyond, people had a whole different set of assumptions about what was reasonable and why it
Mm,
was reasonable. And so one of the things that you will see, you'll probably get if you look at Responsibility of the Throne. I mean, Responsibility is a princess. Her father is a reigning monarch, not exactly an absolute monarch, but I mean, he doesn't listen to a parliament necessarily.
mm,
It's much, his court would be something much more like something like that, say, Henry II Plantagenet would be familiar with. Yes, you'd better listen to the influential nobles because you'll have problems if you don't, but you don't get permission to promulgate decrees or declarations either. And so, and as it turns out, the people have a fairly good reason, to them anyway, for believing that, of course, monarchy is the best system of government. This is why we do it this way, and and yes, we are aware of democracy, and we think it's completely dangerous and chaotic. Because and part of that is, of course, because the concept of a written constitution isn't exactly in these people's heads either.
mm, mm.
So this is where I kind of get to take out my history nerd and play with some various assumptions and mess around with it.
Okay.
Definitely.
So, besides the potential for a paycheck, what do you get out of writing? What do you enjoy about it? What got you get your juices flowing about it?
Oh, well, what was it? I want to say this is C.S. Lewis, but it might be Tolkien, and it might be somebody completely different because my memory is really playing tricks on me with this one. But there was an author I admired deeply who said something on the order of, you know, great literature does not reflect life. It doesn't comment on life. Great literature is an addition to life. And I read that long before I was a writer. And I thought, I remember thinking the first time I encountered that, yes, I mean, in a very real sense, people, one of the things, my life is so much richer for having been allowed to experience not just the planet that actually exists, but also Pern, Barsoom, the Ring World, Arrakis, all Middle Earth, all of those different worlds. And if I am honored to also be have the chance to add my world or my worlds into into the places that people believe make their lives richer for having read it, then that's awesome. Yeah, that really is awesome, and that's why I do this. And yeah, it's definitely not the paycheck because while I've certainly had the privilege of collecting paychecks, it's you notice I do still have a day job, and there is a reason
Exactly,
for that.
exactly. So, speaking of, so you had a book come out in 2021. You're having a book come out this year. How do you get it done? Because you've got a full-time job, you've got family, all that stuff? How do you get it in?
With difficulty.
Mm.
This is what a lot of, and it's really, it involves getting up early and pounding out a few hundred words. It involves staying up a little later and pounding out another few hundred words, and it gets done. Now, I mean, and it doesn't always get successfully done. I wanted to do NaNoWriMo, and I think I hit my 1700. To do NaNoWriMo successfully, you have to do about 1,700 words a day, a little less than that.
Mm.
I believe I made that goal all of maybe 3 days this month.
Mm-hmm.
What can I say? There's, I have a family that I love. I have a day job and students that I also love, and sometimes, but did I write something every day? Yes, I did. Sometimes it was just a sentence, but it's forward, so that's forward progress. So that's what's really important.
Progress is progress.
Indeed, it is.
So, speaking of teaching, have you come across any students that you have potentially encouraged to write? I know you teach history, but seen anybody that you say, oh, I could see them being a good writer or anything like that?
Well, I got to tell you, one of the most awesome moments just happened a few weeks ago. Yes, I teach history, but when I was hired at my present school, the sort of way I got in was that there was an English teacher who needed someone to cover maternity leave, and so they chose me to do that. And so I was teaching junior English, but I was also teaching the senior creative writing class.
Awesome.
And one of my students from that class a couple of weeks ago, she comes back and pops in while I'm in the middle of my afternoon, and she tells me how she's part of a writing team for some sort. I don't remember if she said it was a video game or a role-playing game, but she has been hired as part of a writing team to do this when they get their funding. So she's working right now in some, and I do not know the details, but in some sort of fantasy related writing project. And I was the one who got to see some of her first stuff when she was a senior in high school about 4 or 5 years ago, and say, okay, you want to do it this way, and sort of gave her some feedback about how to make things better. And that was really awesome. So and she came back and said, I really just appreciate what you taught me. And so that was wonderful.
That's gotta feel great. That's gotta,
yeah. It felt great. Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so we're gonna let you do the reading here pretty soon.
Okay.
But before we do that, what can people expect from a Scott Huggins novel? It's like as far as storylines and things like that, without giving too much away, of course.
Okay. Well, I guess here's the thing. I don't write depressing fiction. I don't write nihilistic fiction. I'm not a nihilist, and I mean, it's certainly not true that the good guys always win and we always have a wonderful happy ending, and none of the main characters ever get killed or seriously hurt. Mm-hmm. But the idea is, even when people fail, yes, honor, truth, justice, those are real things. I tend to like stories about when people try to achieve something worthwhile. And the idea that everything is terrible and horrible and awful, well, I mean, I think we all feel that way sometimes, but that's not the kind of thing that you build a life on. So yeah, you can you can expect, real heroes, flawed heroes, villains you may sympathize with a bit, but in the end of the day, it is, you are what you choose to be.
Hmm. No,
So
that's a great description. I like that because I know what you're talking about, man. I'll read some books and I just come away like, man, I need a break. It's like
yeah,
I'm worn out by I just depressed by reading some of these doom and gloom novels.
everyone is horrible and nothing matters. Thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I bailed out of Walking Dead. It's just it got a bit too gloomy. Just that constant gloom. That's like, okay, I'm out.
Yeah, yeah, I
um,
understand.
so before we do the reading, we're gonna give away two books, and we'll announce that after the reading.
Okay.
Who wins that? And so you're gonna do a reading from the current book, or
I am going to do a reading from the current book. Yes.
okay? So what I'm gonna do is give you the screen. I'm gonna leave, and I'm gonna let you do your thing. And when you're done, I'll come back.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to read now from sort of the early part of the book, and for those of you who have been who are fans of Responsibility, or is her real name is Azri Kam. Azri Kam here is actually being trained by a couple of her mentors. So here we're gonna and the mentors you will have met before in the first book, Elazar, another half dragon, and Sanatha, who is a dragon. All right, so here we go. As it turned out, Elazar had quite a few exercises lined up for them, but the morning was spent in reviewing aerial fighting forms. After an hour in the Crane Torm's courtyard, he declared her performance barely adequate and called for an early lunch, telling her she hadn't eaten enough. Her flight muscles and legs burning, Azri Kam said, "Have I ever told you, Elazar, how grateful I am that your lessons are not so aggressively practical as Sanatha's?" The old bronze half dragon blinked. "I think perhaps I ought to be insulted," he said mildly, taking a bite of fish. "Oh no, please don't be," Azri Kam said hastily. Elazar looked at her coolly, and the ghost of a smile played on his lips. "It's a terrible thing to have your student, a member of your own people no less, think of you as less intimidating than a dragon. Is it because I lack the draconic virtues of being straightforward, honest, and determined to accept no less than the best?" "Not at all," Azri Kam swallowed. "Or is it the lack of fangs, sword-length claws, fiery breath, and an even ton of armored muscle at my disposal?" "Yes, that's it entirely," said Azri Kam, grateful for the excuse. "Liar," said Elazar easily. "You've hardly seen Sanatha in her true form, and she's terrified you ever since you met her. I think she knows something I don't about how to get you to learn rapidly and well." "Elazar, the last time I learned rapidly and well from you, would you say it was when I learned diplomacy in order to save all our lives by negotiating the end of the Akaya's mutiny? Or was it when I learned to fight with air swords so Ambassador Salino wouldn't kill me in the dueling ring?" "You were indeed a credit to my teaching both times," said Elazar. "I'd rather not have you think I have to be afraid for my own life to learn your lessons," Azri Kam essayed a smile. It was largely because of Elazar that she'd survived long enough to know her family at all. She loved the old man, not more than her father, but differently than her father. Crown David IV hadn't, after all, been at her side as she faced down her personal nightmare aboard the Century ship. He couldn't have been. Elazar had. Elazar surveyed both their plates. Azri Kam couldn't have eaten another bite, and he rose. "Come, we have an appointment with your other teacher." "I thought we were finished. You mean I'm going to have a lesson with you and Sanatha?" But Eleazar would say no more and simply walked from the courtyard to one of the crane-torn walls. Though the top of the wall was only a 10-foot rise by a staircase from the level of the courtyard, it looked out over a 30-foot drop. Azrikam had hoped they wouldn't be flying so soon after eating, but she knew better than to argue. She shrugged on her flight harness and attached her air swords. Then she launched herself after Eleazar. As soon as he had caught a thermal rising from the stones of the courtyard below, Eleazar banked inland and she followed. They flew for a time, heading darkward beyond the city. Azrikam maintained altitude above and behind her mentor, mostly because she'd rather dive unexpectedly than climb if Eleazar had indeed decided she needed advanced flight lessons. They were heading for the Throne's Forest. She looked behind her to get her bearings. The silver dragon behind her roared rage and surged forward. Azrikam heard a piercing shriek and realized it was her. She winged over and dived, but Sanatha was faster. She shot past Azrikam in a wave of turbulence that sent her tumbling through the sky. She was closing on Eleazar in a dive. Still fighting to arrest her fall, Azrikam saw Sanatha's chest swell and choked on another scream. Sun-yellow flame blew through the air Eleazar had occupied. But he was no longer there. The bronze form had dived and then looped through the air in a wing-wrenching spiral that took him behind Sanatha. The dragon followed him with her serpentine neck and lashed out with her tail. He rolled out of the way and drew his air swords. Then he charged. Within a second, he was past her tail. Evading a swipe of her rear talons, he banked right and drew a line of red blood up the narrow roots of Sanatha's tough wing membrane. She shrieked, and he let his dive carry him toward her head. She snapped at him, but Eleazar pirouetted in the air and lashed out twice, leaving gouts of blood near her eyes. Then he spread his wings and let Sanatha's momentum carry her past him, and he hit her other wing root, leaving a trail of blood behind. Sanatha fell to the forest floor, trailing droplets of red. Before Azrikam could recover herself, Eleazar flew back toward her. She was on the point of drawing her own air swords when she noticed several things at once. Sanatha's fall had carried her to a convenient clearing in the trees below. There was a complete lack of a rending crash as she hit the ground. Eleazar wasn't holding air swords, but long wands with bloody tufts of hair waving at their tips. "Well, come down and let's finish the lesson," he said. "Will it include how to recover from having my heart stopped in mid-flight?" she yelled at his retreating form. After alighting, Azrikam walked into the clearing to find both of her teachers waiting for her. "Why did you two stage a mock combat? What possible lesson could you be trying to teach me?" "How to kill dragons," said Sanatha. "And why would I need to learn how to kill dragons?" "If you are paying so little attention to our discussion over lunch," said Eleazar, "I definitely feel insulted. And if you haven't been paying attention to the throne and the crown's lessons, you've been foolish. You can't be naively blind to the danger posed by dragons any more than you can ignore that posed by men. If you're attacked, you must know how to respond. You're not faster in flight than a dragon, but you are more mobile. The only defense against a dragon is a determined and fast offense. Now, what vulnerabilities did you see?" "The wing roots," said Azrikam. "The eyes. I can see the paint." "Now tell me why." "No, I know why," said Azrikam, temper flaring. "It only makes sense, and it's time you learned to trust that I can see the truth of things without having to explain them back to you as if I were still an uneducated Ikayan. But why do you know how to kill dragons? We've never encountered another civilization of dragons before, have we? So what, you kept up with it just because we might?" "Would that be so wrong?" asked Eleazar. "The Even March fleet practices killing men all the time." "Yes, because our primary enemy is the Consortium, or the Century ships, or the other Near Islanders, and they're all men, not dragons. So why are you training to kill them? Why are you training me to? Do you think I'm likely to be attacked? By whom? Lina-san? Her family? And aren't we supposed to be neutral, the symbols of the union of men with dragons? Yes, but neutral doesn't mean unprepared. It means being prepared to do violence to either side, equally, should the need arise. You can't stop violence simply by hoping two sides won't fight. You must be prepared to enforce any peace you hope to bring about. Her mentor took a step nearer to her. I suspect this would be easier, much easier, if your mother had survived, because you would have grown up seeing her as a real person and not, he hesitated, not as a goddess you've worshipped from afar. Worshipped? What do you mean, worshipped? Said Azrikam, stung. She left me. Eleazar shook his head. Hatred is a form of worship, only turned backward and gone rotten. You can't have helped but wish she'd come back to you, and that's wounded you deeply, as would any of us. But we half-dragons, sized as humans, have always found it easier to live our lives in awe of our dragon parents. We live on a human scale, even though we share the dragon's perspective. You have double that failing, and you need to get rid of it, because whether you realize it or not, you are, in a sense, our queen. Azrikam staggered. What? What can you even mean by that? I'm no such thing. Legally, no, you're not, said Eleazar. But if it ever came to a crisis in which the half-dragons had to decide whether the humans or the dragons of the Twin Kingdom were at fault, your voice would be one we'd listen to. The half-dragon's allegiance, and which way it was thrown, and why, could mean the difference between a short insurrection and a bloody civil war. Azrikam felt cold fear run through her veins. Are you saying such a war is coming? No. And yes. I'm saying that it's always coming. It comes closer every time one of the two peoples does another wrong. It retreats only when we acknowledge it. We're so different that it's very easy for one side to begrudge the other their strength, or their sorcerous power, or their riches, or their immense possession of tools. You've already done well to save our peoples from their enemies who would threaten them from afar. You'll have to defend them from themselves as well. Azrikam opened her mouth and closed it. And that involves defending yourself as well, rumbled Sanatha. Now, take his wands and let's see if you can duplicate his feat. Azrikam hesitated. Sanatha, why didn't either of you use sorcery against each other? Sanatha blinked. Sorcery? As a weapon? Well, yes, you're brilliant at it. Couldn't you have, I don't know, summoned lightning or a hard wind or something? Eleazar smiled at Sanatha. She isn't slow, Sanatha. She just hits all the problems from the leeward side. Sanatha shook her head. Something else I should have explained to you, and again, it's something most children pick up before they're even invested in the theurge. There are 3 reasons. The direct use of the theurge as a weapon against another person usually results in the would-be sorcerer being taken by the void. In fact, I don't even know the verb to kill, and if I did, I'd never use it. But, Azrikam sputtered in confusion, but I saw Merav kill with it. You didn't, said Sanatha flatly. But I did. She pointed at one of the sea people and... And? Sanatha raised an eyebrow. She said an incantation and he seized up and dropped dead. You don't remember this incantation? No. Did it include the word Nyarderi? Sanatha asked dryly. Yes, Sanatha snorted. That wasn't a killing spell. That was a specialized healing spell being gravely misused, a practice I had words with her about on our voyage home from that incident. Occasionally, a patient's heart gets into a bad rhythm. That incantation stops the heart briefly and generally causes the patient intense discomfort and a loss of control of all bodily functions. I'm certain it looked as though he'd dropped dead, but her victim would likely have recovered in a few minutes. It's terribly unsafe to use the theurge to kill. And the other two reasons? If her victim had been a sorcerer himself, he could have used the connection between their bodies against her and done even more damage. It's a tricky thing to pull off, but it's enough of a risk that no sorcerer worth anything wants to take the chance. She could have been killed. And finally, even an unskilled sorcerer has an easy defense against such a thing. Can you have forgotten? Kreka Ferfan? Exactly. Unless the spell kills instantly, the victim has only to end the incantation. It's quite simple. This is why duels in sorcery are almost unheard of. Now, it's quite true that one of your suggestions had merit, said Elazar. Sorcery can be used to distract, to hurl objects, or as you said, alter airflows, or a few other things that can end up being quite fatal. But Kreka Ferfan will counteract most of them. And therefore, unless you're fighting foes like the Consortium who can't use the theurge, they aren't very useful. So we won't be using them today, much as you might want to. Sanatha leaned down. And we won't be allowing you to distract us with further questions today until we see you attempt what you've just been shown. The wands, Azrikam. Okay, that's a good place to stop it. And so I'm going to leave us with that scene.
That was awesome, man. So, well, I'm intrigued. I want to read it.
Good.
Also, what you should do is when we're finished with this recording is edit this video down to your reading and submit that for an audition to narrate books. Because that was
okay. There we go.
That was pretty good. That was good. I thought I was listening to an audiobook. So there you go. That was.
Oh, well, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, that was good. So I love audiobooks. And the reason I like it is for what you just showed is because there you hear the inflection, you hear accents and different voices, and it's actual theater. You're putting on a show, and that's why it's more entertaining for me. Plus my imagination's not that great. So thank you for that. That was great. It's probably one of the better readings we've had, although we've had some good ones. So one thing I always fail to ask is, how do you come up with the names for all these characters? Because these are some very unique names. Do they just come to you? You say, "Oh, that sounds right. Let's do that." Or
well, in this case, what I will often do is I'll look at, I'll sort of take a culture that I'm at least passingly familiar with and model and sort of take some of the names from that. The human names here are actually sort of a very what's a good word for this? A very sort of changed version of actually I took it from Hebrew. So the names of the humans and the half dragons will be related to names that you might find in the Old Testament of the Bible. The dragons are not really. The dragons have their own kind of culture that is parallel but not the same as human culture, and those I just made up, frankly. Don't really have a genesis for that.
That's cool. All right, so before we forget, we've got some prizes to give away.
Okay.
And do you want me to well, first let's show what they are, or say what they are.
Okay. Well, I was going to give the person who the people we award it to the choice of either getting book number 1 signed, or book number 2 if they've already got book number 1, or if they just want to start with book number 2, that's fine. But I always feel a little weird, like, I'll give you away book number 2, and I'm just like, and if I've got any new people on the stream, they're going to be like, what good does that do me?
Yeah.
Very much.
Well, no, it pushes sales for your first book.
Well, yeah. But
so do you want to choose, or you want me to choose?
I think given the small number of people on the comment stream, maybe I'm gonna let you choose that one.
Okay. So we're gonna go, Marisa, if you would chime in and tell us which book that you would like, and then depending on how she answers, if she's still around. And then Fred Hughes, if you would do the same. Oh, book one for Marisa.
Book one for Marisa. Congratulations, you get this book one.
And Fred, if you're still there, and if he's not, then we'll move on. Going once. Type as fast as you can, Fred. All right, so we're gonna move on to, and I don't know how to say this name.
Natividad, I think.
Natividad. That sounds good. Oh.
Wait. No, you got Fred.
Oh, Fred's back.
I'd rather another. I'm not sure how to interpret that.
A little bit of delay from me. So Fred, is that book one or two? Those are the choices. And if not, it's gonna we're gonna move on. But and so while we're waiting on that, what is in the future for you? What do you have? Okay, we're gonna give it to Natividad, and if you're not already following, or all right, Doctor Evil, I see your cat.
Yeah. I got a cat now.
If you're not already connected with Scott on Facebook, go ahead and get with him. But first, let us know which version, book one or book two, that you would like, or either that, or contact him on Facebook, and we'll. Or what's better for you, Facebook or Twitter, or does it matter?
Probably Facebook would be better.
Okay, so contact him on Facebook if you're, and so that he can get the contact info and mail it out to you when ready. So, with that being said, what's coming up next for you? I know tomorrow is your release,
and
we'll be posting about that tomorrow. But so what's next on the agenda for you writing wise?
Well, I mentioned that I had the story in the Bane anthology about my veterinarian to the evil Dark Lord. And actually, that is my first novel that came out. It was published by a small press, which then went bust, and so now it's indie. But the title of that book is All Things Huge and Hideous. That's the first one, and my fans have been patiently waiting for me to come out with book two. And that is what I have spent my not so successful NaNoWriMo doing. I've been promising people, it's like, no, really, I'm getting to that next. I'm getting to that next. It's like, okay, I am on it now. That is so. Hopefully, we will, by sometime early next year, see the release of All Creatures in His Thrall, which is the title of the next James and Harriet book.
Okay. So, and wait, so who's that going to be published with?
That's actually going to be an independent book. I'm going to publish that one on Amazon myself.
Oh, cool.
Although, if everything's going the way it should be, All Things Huge and Hideous, while it's still my book, should be showing up for sale on Bane.com as well, because they have graciously agreed to host that on their site.
Oh, well, that doesn't hurt.
Not at all.
Any other thought? I mean, something maybe that's not in the works or that you're excited about, some, crazy machinations going on in your brain that might be coming in the future?
Well, it's another CKP thing. The folks who are doing the open world Eldros Legacy, Mark
Hmm.
Stallings has invited me to play around on his continent. I've
Awesome.
done one story, sort of a short story. It's 15,000 words, but that should be coming up in an anthology pretty soon now, I think. And then we will also have. I'm also working sort of on the bare bones of the outline for novels in that universe, and of course, I will be turning to the next responsibility novel soon enough. So
Awesome.
we'll see which of those. I'm not sure whether Responsibility 3 comes first or Eldros Legacy comes first after All Creatures in His Thrall, but those are the next two things in the pipeline.
Oh, the race is on. Okay, so as far as responsibility, is it just gonna be a trilogy, or what do you see for that for this book
No,
series?
no. This is something. I mean, one of the things that's very difficult about fantasy series, as you know, is that there have been a number of properties like Song of Ice and Fire and The Wheel of Time that have gone on and on and on, really, just building this huge arc that has seemed in some cases as if it would not be completed.
Hmm.
That's not what Responsibilities series is like. The best example I can give is if you think of some of the older serial novels like the John Carter of Mars books, or much more recently, Lois McMaster Bujold's excellent Miles Vorkosigan books, where it's the same character having adventures, but each book is more or less a standalone
Hmm.
book, and you get more adventures of the same character, and people want to read it, hopefully because it's the same character. And I mean, Lois McMaster Bujold has now told us that you know there really aren't going to be any more Miles Vorkosigan books, and she wrote it at least a dozen of them.
Hmm.
But frankly, although I miss that character and I would always want to read another Miles Vorkosigan book, she didn't leave us hanging with things unresolved. I mean, it was an ending.
Hmm.
And I honestly think that if I chose not to write any more responsibility books right now, you'd have an ending.
Hmm.
Now, that's not my plan. Just to be very clear about that, I'm not done with this character at all. I've got a lot of adventures that I want to see Responsibility have, but when Responsibilities adventures are done, as some day in the distant future they must be, I would like to think that wherever it gets put down, it will be put down with closure.
Okay.
So,
Awesome.
so I guess that's my long way of saying, don't feel like I don't want to buy this until the series is finished. Because number one, you're going to be waiting a long time, and number two, you're not really gaining anything. You're not avoiding cliffhangers. I'm not doing cliffhangers with this series.
That's all. No, it's very important to say that because I know tons of people that won't. Because we're in a Netflix culture now. We want to guzzle everything down all at once. So no, that's important to say. So in addition to this, where can people see you? As far do you have any appearances, conventions, anything like that coming up?
Well, I am planning to go to LibertyCon in June next year, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be at much earlier than that. That I will go back to Salt Lake City for Life, the Universe, and Everything. I hope I'll be able to get to Fantasy in North Carolina this year. Beyond that, I am not sure.
Okay. Um, so with that, I'll most likely see you at LibertyCon. It's a great convention. I highly recommend it.
Excellent.
And so with that, I encourage everyone who is watching this now and in the future to go buy the books. The reading really sold me on it. I'm gonna try and check it out, and I encourage you to do the same. Before we leave today, I gotta give a shout out to some of our affiliate YouTube channels. The Dudes in Hyperspace YouTube channel. Casey Ezel has her YouTube channel, which you have appeared on. And give her a shout out. Go check it out. She's been putting out more videos lately. Um, on World Builders, Joy Wandry has been doing readings from some of Mark Wandry's books on that. Go check that out. And of course, on the CKP YouTube channel, you will find the latest edition of Future Books podcast. Go there for all your CKP needs. They talk about new releases. They usually highlight an author. This episode, they highlight Mark Wandry with his latest release, Blood in the Water, which is another great book by the creator of the 4HU. And we'll probably be taking a break here from doing a lot of shows with the holidays coming up and everything. But keep a lookout, subscribe, get the notification. So when something does come up, you'll have all the information that you need as far as, videos that are coming out and everything like that. And again, before we leave, Scott, you can find Scott on his website, and I'll say it again: go sign up for his newsletter. It's the best way to keep up with your favorite authors. Of course, you can find him on Facebook and Twitter. Are you on Twitter a lot, Scott?
More these days.
Okay, so that's a great way to communicate with him. And of course, you can find all of his works on Amazon and some of his works on CKP, as he is a prolific writer who writes for several publishers. But we get to get some of his lovely stories here at CKP. And of course, for everything CKP, go to chriskennedypublishing.com and sign up for the newsletter there. Great thing about that is sometimes you get free story. Well, you get free stories, but you could also get selected as a pre-reader, which is a great honor, and you get to see fun stories before they come out, which is awesome.
And if I can say, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, speaking of free stories, if you're interested in the ones that I wrote for Baen, they are free to read on the Baen website. Just have to go to the contest pages, and you'll see both the Jim Baen Memorial Award and the Baen Fantasy Adventure Award.
That's awesome. Thanks for that. And then, of course, if you want to support this channel and Chris Kennedy Publishing, go to Patreon, Chris Kennedy 110. And, of course, in addition to the Chris Kennedy website, you can find everything Chris Kennedy Publishing on Amazon. But go to the website. So Scott, I really appreciate you coming on today, and maybe when part 3 or your next novel comes out, you can come back and talk about that one too. And
I will be happy to.
Oh yeah, we'd love to have you back. And with that, I thank everyone who is watching and it will watch in the future. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here. So I truly appreciate it. And with that, I'll see you next time. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.